Two people find themselves venting about someone in their lives. The conversation starts with frustration and spirals into something unexpected. One of them leans in and asks, "What if we switched? You take care of mine, I take care of yours." No connection to the victims, no traceable motive, nothing to link them to the crimes. One handshake seals a pact, and suddenly the perfect crime is born. Fast forward to a Tuesday morning at a high-end spa in Los Angeles. Sergeant Dottie Reynolds is settling in for her weekly deep tissue massage. The masseuse is pulled away by a fabricated delivery dispute. 10 full minutes. And in that brief window, someone slips into her room and attempts to strangle her. When the masseuse returns, he finds her unconscious. She survives, but only barely. Welcome to Sandy's Timeline, your home for the best TV and movie recaps, told the way a story deserves to be told. If you're new here, subscribe and join the family. Now, let's get into it. Morgan gets call in, because Dottie is not just a colleague, she was Daphne's mentor, the woman she patrolled streets with before she ever made detective. And Soto makes it very clear, this case belongs to Daphne. They head to Dottie's office, where one of Dottie's informants tells them that she was a very by-the-book person. Not everyone appreciated being told how to behave, especially by a woman of color. When they enter her office, Morgan immediately notices that something is wrong. The space has been deliberately disturbed. Binders are out of order and small items are misplaced. It's clear that someone has been going through the files. While searching, they discover a confidential file, the kind Dottie used to track officer conduct records that had not yet been officially filed. Morgan remembers seeing an officer carrying that exact file during an earlier conversation. They go looking for him, but he runs. Daphne manages to catch him. Back at the office, Daphne is given the chance to conduct her very first interrogation. The suspect, Officer Hoff, immediately tries to intimidate her, knowing it's her first time in the room. Daphne counters by bringing up his past mistake, losing his gun outside a Rams game. Hoff defends himself, saying it was a single mistake that could have cost him everything. When he later learned that the conduct files hadn't been officially filed yet, he decided to take advantage of the situation. Using that explanation, he presents his alibi, ultimately ruling himself out as the attacker. Soto later learns that Dottie has regained consciousness. Morgan and Daphne head to the hospital to see if she can provide any information about the attack. However, Dottie explains that there are many people who might have wanted to harm her, and she can't point to any one person in particular. Meanwhile, Karadek and Oz are working what appears to be a completely separate case. A gym trainer named Luke Knight has been found dead in his apartment. At first, it looks like an overdose, but Morgan notices something unusual: marks on Luke's wrists. They're the same Hydra tracker marks she spotted earlier on Dottie's arms. When they dig a little deeper, they realize that both victims were clients at the same spa. Just like that, two cases that seemed unrelated suddenly snap together into one. Dottie eventually discharges herself from the hospital and joins the team. As they piece things together, they begin to form a theory. Since Dottie and Luke visited the spa at different times, it's possible the killer first attacked Dottie there and then later went after Luke at his apartment. It may have been a calculated plan. 2 murders in 2 different locations, making it less likely that anyone would connect the cases. With that in mind, the team begins to suspect that the killer could be either a client or an employee at the spa. Karadek and OZ track Luke's last movements and head to the gym where he worked as a personal trainer. There, they meet Phyllis, who tells them she already suspected something was wrong when Luke failed to show up for his usual 4 a.m. training session. She explains that Luke was a rising trainer who had built a strong reputation thanks to his large social media presence. As far as she knew, he didn't have any enemies. When they show her a photo of Dottie, however, Phyllis says she's never seen her before. Later, while going through Luke's social media posts, Oz and Karadek notice something interesting. One of Luke's recent posts features a current client whose former trainer, Vaz Amadi, also works at the same gym. This raises the possibility that there may have been some rivalry between Luke and Vaz, potentially involving them stealing clients from one another. When they interview Vaz, he admits that Luke was a rising trainer and says he actually admired Luke's drive to succeed. Regarding his whereabouts, the Vaz provides an alibi by showing them a live recorded video of himself training a celebrity client at the time of Luke's death. When asked about Dottie, he tells them he has never seen her before. With Vaz's alibi checking out and no connection to Dottie, the team is once again left without a clear suspect. At the spa, they review sign-in records with the owner and, surprisingly, they can't find any record of him ever visiting the spa. When they ask whether one of the employees might have treated Luke without properly logging him in, the manager insists that it wouldn't have been possible. The next day, Morgan has a breakthrough and brings forward a bold new theory. The murders may have been committed by complete strangers. According to her, this could explain why the investigation keeps hitting dead ends, because the victims had no obvious connection to their attackers. Morgan points out that Dottie has a very predictable daily routine. She leaves her home every morning at 8 a.m., gets coffee around noon, and returns home around 6 p.m. each evening. While scrolling through posts on her neighborhood app, a forum where residents often complain about local issues, Morgan notices something interesting. About 3 weeks earlier, at around 7 a.m., someone posted about a motorcycle blocking a driveway directly across from Dottie's home. Then, 2 weeks later, around noon, another post reported someone speeding through a community garden near Dottie's favorite coffee shop. The most recent post came at 6 p.m., when one of Dottie's neighbors complained about a noisy motorcycle in the area. The timing of these posts lines up almost perfectly with Dottie's daily routine, leading Morgan to believe that someone had been tracking her movements for weeks before the attack. Building on that idea, Morgan suggests another possibility. The attacker who targeted Dottie and the person responsible for Luke's death may not have known either victim personally. In fact, there could be two people involved. Her theory is that the two killers may have swapped targets to confuse investigators and avoid leaving a direct connection between themselves and their victim. After digging deeper, the team learns that Vaz had actually been at the spa around the same time as Dottie, which immediately makes him a suspect. When they run the license plate from the motorcycle mentioned in the neighborhood complaints, it turns out to be a match for Vaz's bike. When they track down Vaz's apartment, they find that he's missing. During a search of the place, they discover a strap that matches the ligature marks found around Dottie's throat. This leads the team to theorize that Vaz may have used something similar during the attack. However, Dottie fought back during the struggle, which could explain the injury to his hand, and the ointments they later find in the apartment. Morgan then adds another piece to the puzzle. She suggests that Vaz may have been using IV drips to recover quickly after workouts, since his body is essentially his brand. Because when she was looking around, she didn't see any of the usual recovery supplements someone like him would typically use. That leads her to believe he must have been getting treatment somewhere else. It's possible that Vaz heard Luke was receiving IV nutrient drips and decided to try the same thing. If the killer knew about Luke's IV treatments, they could have switched out the micronutrient drip and replaced it with a fatal dose of ibuprofen, turning his routine recovery treatment into a lethal one. As the investigation continues, the team discovers that the spa's owner, Kirk, may have been lying about Luke. When questioned about the IV bag supplier, he admits that lately he's been obtaining them from the black market in exchange for sensors, and he names Phyllis Martell, who had been providing him with cut-price, unregulated medical supplies. It turns out Phyllis has a deep history with Dottie. Years ago, Dottie reported her for dangerous hazing, leaving decades of quiet resentment to finally find an outlet. On the other side of the scheme is Vaz, furious that Luke Knight had stolen one of his most important clients and drowning in debt with nowhere to turn. Vaz agreed to target Dottie, while Phyllis agreed to target Luke. Neither of them had any personal connection to the person they attacked. The murder pact, which should have remained hidden, completely unravels. Both Phyllis and Vaz are arrested, and Dottie finally receives the justice that the investigation had almost missed entirely. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like and subscribe to Sandy's Timeline.